Welcome. I'm Harmony Slater, your host of the Finding Harmony podcast. Over the past 20 years, I've taught thousands of yoga teachers and students to explore the intersection between ancient wisdom and modern everyday life, using mind-body practices to heal, awaken, and manifest their dreams from the inside out. This podcast is a sanctuary for those feeling overwhelmed by life's challenges. Are you ready to jump in and discover how these challenges aren't actually in the way, but are the way to finding harmony? Let's invite the magic back in. Hello, and welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I cannot wait to introduce you to our guest today, who is a powerful force in the wellness space. She is an international yoga teacher, teacher trainer, as well as a regular contributor to Yoga Journal. She founded the Ashe Collective, which is an online platform that focuses on trauma-informed yoga, somatics, yin yoga, restorative yoga, and yoga nidra. And we're going to get into a little bit of the nuance, the differences between these different types of practices, so that we're not collapsing them all into the same thing. They do have their own special tone or flavor. And she also has created an incredible space that's dedicated to healing through flowers and gardening and art and yoga, with a special interest for renewal and transformation and social justice. I cannot wait for you to just absorb all the beautiful wisdom from Tamika Caston-Miller. She is just an amazing woman. You're going to feel the Shakti flowing through her, and what she's created both online and in person is just totally mind-blowing and transformational. She is focused so much on just trauma-informed yoga, ancestral remembering, the powerful rebellion of taking rest, how that becomes a rebellious act in a world where we are constantly caught up in doing and producing and working, and also the way that she's supporting marginalized communities within her area, both online and offline. So I'm so excited about this interview. It was incredible. We could have talked forever. I know you're going to love it. And just another incredible entrepreneur who is so inspiring and creating wellness spaces virtually and in person, holding an incredibly accepting, compassionate space for people to come into. And I think it'll inspire you even to elevate your own business and your own offerings. And if you're looking for a program that can help you do that, I would highly recommend joining B School this summer with Marie Forleo and myself. I will be holding my mastermind group in support of those who join B School through me, and supporting you in elevating your own business and creating wellness spaces that are inclusive, that are trauma-informed, teacher training programs, online, offline spaces that really can help to feed your soul, nurture and heal the people that you've been called to serve in this world, and really up-leveling our collective community, increasing our consciousness and raising the vibration. Let's do it. So head on over to my website if you'd like more information on how to join my B School Mastermind this summer. And without further ado, let's jump into this interview with Tamika. Hi, welcome to the Finding Harmony podcast. I'm here today with Russell Case.
Good morning. You got to tell me all about this guest today. I'm so excited. I'm chomping at the bit. I got questions.
I know you do. I am so excited too, because our guest today is Tamika Caston-Miller, who is so inspiring, an incredible human being, and I'm just so excited to talk to her. Hello, Tamika. How are you?
Hi.
Hi, I am wonderful. How are you two?
Good.
Is that like Gaston, like the French, like Gaston, Gaston?
Gaston.
Is it?
Yes, it's Louisiana showing up.
Okay, so now, were you born there? Were you born and raised? Is that where you're from? Is that where you went to school?
So I was raised in Texas, but I was reared in Louisiana. So if you're from the
As
South,
was
you know
I.
about rearing.
I
You were
was
reared
born in
in Louisiana?
Detroit, but reared in Slidell.
Oh, what? Oh my.
Not Slidell.
First of all, only 6 people know where Slidell is. No, I'm just joking. No, everyone.
She don't. She do not know where it is. She know you couldn't point her out to a map.
What? Oh my
No.
gosh. Okay, so now my family's from DeQuincy, which is this big. And we always thought that the big city, which was New Orleans, well, not we, my family, they were like, that's where all the dangerous things
They're
happen.
not wrong.
That's where all. So we were disallowed to spend any time in New Orleans, and then of course my daughter ends up going to university there, and I'm there like, and even I went to university. I got my master's from UNO.
Oh shit! Yeah.
So
Oh,
UNO Blue
yes,
Wave. Blue
amazing.
Wave. UNO.
the pirate the privateers.
Privateers. Never mind.
The
Yes,
privateer.
yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I'm like, here we are celebrating pirating.
Yeah, right.
That's how the city was made. Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
not in slavery.
Yeah, true that.
I moved down there. I moved down there when I was 13, and it, I was very much a fish out of water. But I'd gotten used to kind of my mom moved around all the time, so I was always a stranger wherever he was. When I moved down there, it was just more of the same. So like a northerner who didn't know how to talk, and then adjusted. One of my fondest memories about the whole thing is that I graduated and I decided to go back up to school in Chicago. And I was in the south side of Chicago, and I saw a brother wearing LSU colors. And I'm so excited. I'm like a sweet summer child. And I ran up to him. I was like, "Are you from New Orleans? Are you from Louisiana too?" And I was so excited. Like, you're wearing the LSU colors. You from New Orleans? Oh my God! Did you go to school there? And he looks at me like, "What is this white boy on?" Motherfucker, get the fuck away from me. And I was like,
But you sounded like you're from Louisiana,
I was
just like you legit.
Yeah,
like,
I
you
was
got the
excited.
accent.
And then I learned very quickly
Was he
that
actually from there? No, he was just wearing the colors.
I never
No.
found out. He didn't talk to me.
No.
I found out very
It-
quickly in Chicago. There's a lot more separation.
Oh yes, if he were from Louisiana, that he would not have gotten that response.
Right.
Yeah.
If,
No, we would have
like, 'cause
talked.
People,
We would have been friends.
Yes, there would have been conversation.
We would be
That's
going to the
thing.
same bars and be having a good time.
Yeah, they would have gone out for drinks. Would have found the place for hurricanes
Oh, I
or
know. We watch the Saints
something.
games together, have a good time. I meet his family. We eat. I cook
Yes,
jambalaya
that's
for
the thing.
everybody.
Louisiana full of racism, but everyone somehow still gets along. It's really weird. It's complicated, but it's
It's a Creole thing. It's a
it's
mix.
a Creole thing.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my family is they're from Louisiana and Mississippi, but we didn't really do the Mississippi side. So that
You
was just kind of like,
pretended it wasn't there.
even though it's literally across just across the street practically, but we're like, "No, we don't really do that side." But so I grew up in Dallas, in a very bougie part of Dallas, North Dallas. But then every summer I was with my grandparents, and it was like sitting out on the porch, eating crawfish from a bucket, drinking sun tea and lemonade, and all of the great aunts are getting drunk in the living room, and
Love
just
it.
like that was my norm. And so I had this deep understanding of being like Creolized and Southernized. And then going to Dallas was completely different. Then that I would have to put on kind of a different way of being to be there.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting was that my Louisiana upbringing, because they kind of come up, they were like, ooh, we're like in the upper echelon of folks. which was mostly just because of like colorism and things like that. But anyway, they were just fair complected
Right,
and
fair
Creole.
skinned, yeah.
So because of that, they were just like, you know, we're highfalutin. We don't do country things, but they were definitely country folks. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I never really saw a difference between like Dallas and Louisiana, Dallas and DeQuincy until I realized I was like, yeah, they were pretty
Yeah.
country. But yeah, and then New Orleans, you know, I didn't really get there until, you know, I went to grad school, and my daughter went to school there, and I was like, New Orleans is amazing. I love this.
Is there a
Where's it been all my life?
lot of life there in that
Yeah.
city? Oh my gosh.
And a lot of culture that really has been kind of hidden by all of the people coming in just to like drink and party and all of that.
Yeah,
There's just so much culture and history there that unfortunately people don't kind of get to. They don't get to know that part.
But like Mardi Gras, it's like 1.5 million people come to the city for that weekend, and that's how people know the city. But actually, they don't get to know the city because the denizens leave town and go camp in Mississippi, for example, over the weekend of Mardi Gras because they don't want to be there for that. And so the people that come there, it's almost like the campground around a Grateful Dead show. It's its own city of people.
That's so accurate.
And it's not at all like they don't mean
It's like
anybody.
Burning Man moves in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's burning. And it's not. It's its own thing. It's got nothing to do with the culture. It's like I went to the New Orleans Center of Creative Arts, and so I was like immersed in the Marsalis brothers, and like Jason Marsalis, you know, was my co-student. So like I was like in that. I mean, that's the real nobility of the city is the musical heritage.
Yeah, it's really interesting how people just kind of gravitate towards the fun, the drinking, the vomiting. Like it's like let's just do like the worst together, and they forget that the city was incredibly important to our history and the culture and all of those things. And hilariously, I've still never been to Mardi Gras. I've never actually done that. Now I will say I've done St. Patty's Day because that in and of itself is pretty fun as well.
Yeah.
But I just can't do it. I'm just like, I don't want to see the city destroyed like this.
Yeah.
You know, maybe Southern Decadence will be my next.
It's a hell of a thing.
That would be
when
fun.
I went there, my mom and I we were on our own, and we drove down there in March, say it's in 1992. Drove down there, and we were going to get ourselves all packed in to Slidell. Like we heard it was Mardi Gras. Sunday, like we had arrived like Sunday around noon, and mom was crazy. Mom said, let's go see it. You know, it's like we're gonna go see a parade. You know, it'll be nice.
You're like gonna drive by like a zoo.
Yeah. And like get some sparklers and watch the parade like you would in Illinois. You know, and
Illinois.
we arrive and it's like just like wasted Yankees, just like half drunk. You know, like on the raft of the Medusa, like just dead, naked people just lying on the street. And then we finally saw one of those those crowds that form of white men with video cameras around a nubile young woman, and they're trying to convince her to take her clothes off so they can throw beads at her.
No,
you know, that thing. So like every
you saw that.
You never saw that. So then every 50 feet to 100 feet, you get a new pocket. And it's like it's a scrum of men surrounding a young girl who's like, oh, I'm going to get some beads. Sure, I'll take my clothes off. And so I was like watching boobs after boobs. I'm 13 years old with my mom, watching boobs after boobs with my mom. And it's like, this is kind of crazy, Mom. I'm not sure we're supposed to be here. So we decided
You're like,
to leave.
I'm 13.
I'm 13 and I'm with my mom.
Somehow
and
you knew then.
We almost got out, and then we said, and then there was one more crowd, and my mom said, "Okay, let's watch one more." And so I'm like, "Okay, we sit and watch one more." And there's 3 girls, and there's like this scrum of men with their video cameras and their beads, you know, like say 50 men, and the last one, and 2 girls lift up their shirts, and it's more boobs, and the girl in the middle decided, "Shit, I'll pull up my skirt." And it's full bush. And I'm like, I'm 13 with my mom watching Full
Also,
Bush.
is this the 70s?
This is 1993. Well, it was, man, it was intense. Like you start looking for it the rest of your life. It's like, I need to find Full Bush again. And
Yeah.
and so I'm looking at it, and my mom and I look at each other. It's like, well, now we've seen that together.
Yeah. We're never going to the city
What
together
will
again.
never-
What a wholesome moment.
But shit, you're right. We never ever went to the city together ever again. In the next 5 years, my mom and I were never in the city at the same time. She went by herself with her
Wow.
boyfriend. I'd go with all my
Wow.
girlfriends or whatever. And
Wow.
like, never again did we go together.
You know, it's so interesting because, you know, the name of your podcast is Finding Harmony. And I just think it is hilarious that, so there's all this mayhem, right? That's like, this is a perfect example. I remember my daughter's first year at university. I mean, she wasn't there. She went to Loyola, New Orleans. I was super concerned, two things. That one, she was going to like turn into some raving drunk. And then the other was that she would never come home. Because I'm like, who would want to leave New Orleans, you know? And she was there 1 week. And school hadn't yet begun. And she said, Mom, there are people drunk and hungover, passed out in their own vomit in the halls. She said, by the way, they're all from Tulane. They're not from here.
That's the blue wave. It's the Tulane blue wave.
Yes, because Tulane and Loyola are the two closest universities in the U.S. So all the Tulane people were like drunk and all that because the Tulane folks were wealthy and the Loyola folks had kind of earned being there or whatever. And she was like, I'm never doing that. And as long as she lived in that city, she did not drink.
Wow.
And I was like, look at you.
Yeah.
Look at you. I did that.
Yeah,
And
good job,
she
Mom.
still, yeah, right. To date, she still doesn't, but she was just, it was almost as though she was harmonizing the space that she was in. And it's like, that's just definitely not for me. You know what I mean? And of course she didn't witness me ever drinking like that either. I didn't really drink like that either because I had a father who was an alcoholic. So I was like,
Yeah.
I know how this story ends. I'm not really interested in that. So yeah,
But
it was wild.
I mean, this is a weird thing to say. I stopped drinking. I went sober at 15. I got clean at 15.
You got clean.
Actually, it only sounds odd to people who aren't familiar with Louisiana.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. It's Napoleonic law. So you
it's
can
a
go
whole thing.
into the bars and drink, and it's on you if you get caught. It's not on the owner, because that's
Right.
how it's the reverse Napoleonic law.
Yeah, it's wild, and it's just, you know, I don't know. I'm always just kind of aware that I don't like being in those environments because I feel really unsafe in them. And so it was really, really interesting to have my progeny kind of figure that out on her own. But yeah, I mean, it's amazing. But there you go. There's Louisiana in a nutshell. I think we just summed it up.
Yeah.
I'm just joking. No, y'all, please do not let this be the reductionist version. Whoever's listening, that is not Louisiana in a nutshell.
But you have this wonderful quote on your website, and Harmony really wanted to talk with you
Yeah,
about
yeah.
it. And it's really nice. And it's this notion that children of alcoholics, and I think all three of us can speak to this, may wear themselves out by being caregivers. And I wonder if you can talk about that dynamic, why it happens that you overcare. Is it kind of like the enabling of the parent? And I know Harmony wants to talk about it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only became aware really of this propensity for caretaking to be a thing for children or for people who've been around addiction. I think that what ends up happening is, you know, of course, we project so much, right? Like our whole lives we're projecting. And I think we're always, you know, we're always learning. We're either learning by example or non-example. And For me, I had a father who was in, an active addiction for most of my, probably until I was about 21, and then he got everything cleaned up, and he's sober now. Um, but what I saw was just this kind of need for my mother to constantly clean up messes. Now, what that looked like in my family was cleaning up financial messes, um, cleaning up, not showing up for this, that, or the other. And he was a very kind alcoholic, so didn't kind of resonate with what people um, thought about that. He was kind of very jovial and all of that. I see now that that was a way of metabolizing a lot of childhood trauma, because he was also the son of a sharecropper. And now that I kind of understand what that life looked like, I get it. But there's a bunch of, I was around a lot of alcoholism, and there was always someone who was kind of cleaning things up. My mother moved us away from all of that. That when my parents divorced finally, she went from a stay-at-home mom to now a working mom, trying to figure that out. Like, how do you get a job after 13 years of not being in the workplace? Um, and and so I think for me, what I just absorbed, even though I didn't realize it, was this picking up where people weren't showing up. And I noticed that I would do that with the people who I was around. I would always give people chances to show up for their best selves. But then if they failed, then I would just kind of clean it up for them. And it wasn't until a friend of mine, Sarah Ezrin, who's also a yoga teacher, she said, I unlearned a lot of that in Al-Anon. And I was like, what? This is a tendency from children
Wow.
of,
Yeah.
of addicts? And I had no idea. I just thought possibly it was just a people pleasing thing, a middle child thing. I had all of these reasons for why this could be true. I didn't realize that it came from a sense of safety and just needing to kind of cover up for other people. So, and I married an alcoholic. Wasn't We weren't together that long, but but my daughter's father was an alcoholic. And so even with them, I was constantly like, oh, he just doesn't have, he just isn't available right now, or he just can't show up right now, or he lives far away now, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, you know what? So now my old age, now that I'm mature, I'm just like, first of all, work with better people, and secondly, let people fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's powerful. That's powerful, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a tendency we don't want people to fail, and we want to kind of I mean, and maybe it is, being children of alcoholics, or growing up in environments of addiction where there's a lot of shame. There's a lot of like covering up and shame and not speaking about it.
Oh, absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it's definitely a trained, in yoga maybe we'd say a samskara, right? It's a trained habit to cover things up and make everything look like it's fine and normal and functioning really well.
Yeah, everything's great. Everything's fine. Everything's wonderful.
Right.
I did that for so long. I did that. I remember distinctly saying to myself and like committing to myself, okay, I'm a single mom now. So I am going to work my ass off so that my daughter has a middle class upbringing. So she doesn't actually see that she has a different experience from her peers that have two parent households and all of that. So I'm just going to do that. And I did so much covering up and so much just working myself to the bone, working in environments that I wouldn't work in now, that were very corporate, being around like, everyone's kind of like, what, OnlyFans? I'm like, no, I was around CEOs and CFOs, and they were the worst of humanity.
Oh my God.
They're so much worse. They're the people who were very much like always trying to, sleep with naive people, and were always constantly cheating on their spouses and all of that, or in the closet or whatever. And there was just so much lying involved with that. There was a lot of alcohol involved in those environments. I'm sure there's more, but I would just be like, I'm just going to work, work, work. And these environments that today I would never put myself in, and today I would distance myself from, because I need to make this amount of money so that my daughter feels like she has a normal life.
Mm-hmm.
And now I kind of wish I would have been more in a visual struggle with her, because I think that she would have had more realistic expectations of what life looks like as an adult.
Oh, I've heard that with parenting, that it's often helpful to talk to your child about your struggles, because it
Mm-hmm.
does help them normalize struggle, and so they
Mm-hmm.
don't feel kind of so wounded or out of sorts when it happens to them.
Right. Because
Yeah.
we're all going to have struggles
Mm.
and we're all going to have problems. And I did so much tap dancing to make it look like everything was fine.
Mm-hmm.
I now have language for this. It's called Sojourner Syndrome, where it's a common thing with Black women to, work themselves to the bone. And then when people ask how you're doing, they're like, no, no, I'm fine. Everything is great. And it actually has negative health outcomes for Black women. So we die a lot sooner than our white counterparts because we're too busy masking
Mm-hmm.
what's actually going on. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm not dying for that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just
Mm.
going to go ahead and break. Not that I've died before. I mean, maybe.
Maybe.
How many
Anyway,
thousands
but
of times have we died for that? Yeah. Mm.
exactly. But I'm not going to
Yeah.
be a part of this machine that just says it's okay to just kill yourself lying about how you actually are.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's a lot of, too, I mean, past generational trauma that's being handed down,
Right.
especially like as a woman, but
Right.
like also as a Black woman. And, I mean,
Right.
just even as a culture, I mean, when I think of like my parents and my grandparents and things that they went through as farmers, as,
Immigrants.
immigrants coming to a country, I mean, there's a whole different kind of understanding of what it means to show up and work and just like keep
Right.
your head down, and you don't complain, and you don't,
Mm-hmm.
you're not processing, like feelings don't really matter. And so,
Right. Feelings don't matter. Your baseline of what
yeah.
you tolerate is just so high.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, yeah, no, I just kind of don't want to do that anymore. I
Yeah.
don't want to show that to the people who are around me. I don't want people to think that's a natural default of living dharma or living a life of honesty or anything, or like a spiritual life. And now that I have grandbabies, I don't want them to think that struggle is just like, I don't want them to see that as the norm, but I do want them to see hard work. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's
Yeah.
a difference between those two. But like struggle to just keep up with the Joneses and all of that, I want them to see a little bit of joy and play, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be related to external things, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so it's been really interesting just trying to find a balance of all of that, and to say, okay, my ancestors did it this way, and I'm so grateful for them. And also, I don't have to do that. I can mend as the Native communities would say, mend the hoop. So I
Mm-hmm.
can mend the hoop by
Mm-hmm.
not carrying that forward, and
Mm-hmm.
doing
Yeah.
something a little different.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I love this, something else that really stuck out, and it's connected, which is, and I think this is something that, I mean, it seems like in COVID, we all became so aware of, nervous system and dysregulation in our nervous system, and trauma and carrying trauma, and, micro traumas and big T trauma, and in all capacities, but then also how we were dealing or not dealing with different things in our lives, in our present day lives, in our past lives. It kind of all really came to the surface. And, in the Ashtanga yoga lineage, we have Patabi Joyce is, quoted over and over again for saying, like, practice and all is coming. And I love
Mm-hmm.
on your website, I read rest and all is coming. And I think that this is
Yes.
so powerful. And I'm pretty sure in this conversation on the panel that we were doing for Yoga Gives Back, you said something to the effect of rest is a radical act of rebellion or something to
Mm-hmm.
this
Oh
extent.
man,
And
in
I would
this
love
hustle
you,
culture,
yeah, I
absolutely.
would just love you to
Mm-hmm.
speak to the
Mm-hmm.
importance of rest, because I think it's so overlooked and it's so important. Like to actually
it's
process stuff too, right? Like you can't process stuff
yes,
if you're not resting.
right. Yeah, I don't think people really understand how much we are constantly on in order to avoid feeling our feelings. I just, and there are a couple of things. It's an act of rebellion for one, for folks that come from cultures that really have been disallowed to rest. I mean, there's actual legislation outlawing vagrancy, and where you have things like that, where it's like resting will literally get you,
Arrested.
imprisoned,
Yeah.
That's a
arrested
cool
and
sentence.
imprisoned.
Resting will get you arrested.
We did that together. We
Yeah.
did that together.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, wow. Also, but anyway,
Yeah.
resting will get you arrested. So I was just thinking, I was just like, no wonder I'm caught up with this. No wonder. And then also just like you were saying, grind culture, thinking that, oh, if I work more, I'll get more. Work harder, play harder. Actually, it's just work harder, work harder. It's you're
Right.
not guaranteed any play on the other side of that. Rest has to, and play have to be intentionally crafted and curated into your life. So I just think it's very rebellious, especially against, late stage capitalism. And then on top of that, resting together then becomes a really revolutionary act. So I love this idea of just rest in general. I love this idea. I'm going to do it. Okay, but also, like,
Not
when I
yet.
rest, I know, no, but when, like, a restorative yoga, if the three of us were to take a restorative class together, first of all, I'll be the one snoring, but but
Me
if
too.
we were to all three take a restorative class together, just think about it. Think about our histories. Think about our DNA, and we're just resting. That means I have to trust enough to rest near you, to rest next to you. I have to put down my guard. I have to trust the container that this is happening in. And there's a lot of forgiveness in that space. And it just and then there are no expectations. I also have to let go of the natural caretaker within me to be like, oh, did you need a block? Do you need me to share my blanket? All those
Yeah, yeah.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all those things just kind of have to go away, and I really don't think people acknowledge that enough. And there's one last thing I'll say about it, and that is, um, my best ideas have come when I'm rested. I always laugh, and I'm like, man, 8 hours of sleep, I can cure cancer. Like, bring it on, Like,
But you
I
actually
have
will. If you're rested
ideas.
enough, you will defeat the little cancer cells in your body with your immune
Also
system.
that,
Yeah. I,
also that,
yeah.
literally and figuratively.
Because that's the thing about what are oh gosh, ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how having those high amounts of adverse childhood experiences, which are very much more common in, say, working class environments, how you can reduce your lifespan by 10, 15, 20 years because of the inability to regulate stress, because you're
Oh
so
yes.
used to it. You have such a tolerance for being for violence.
Right.
And so, and then like that, the violence in a working class environment is so much more prevalent than in an upper middle class, environment. Like, say, you got one guy whose dad, works like my dad did as a welder, and then you got another guy whose dad is a pastor. Completely different household experience. One is going to be so much more inured to violence than the other one, and have then a much more different immune system,
Right.
irregardless of ethnicity, and how fucking stressful that is, just walking outside.
That's just another layer.
Yeah.
That's just another layer. And then it's, when you're looking at that, I mean, so I always say, okay, when I was growing up, I was definitely, I didn't experience like poverty until I was in high school, when, the whole divorce happened, and I was like, oh my gosh, wait, we're moving from our big fancy, how like our this life into the ugliest house that was the most, but that was available within the same school district type situation. And so I never, so I'm blessed to have had the experience of both this kind of ideal Huxtable experience, the whole experience, but then also a real working class, impoverished, making my own clothes
Yeah.
background.
Been there.
And then, and now, I'm back and, living well. But those things, the people that I had to kind of rely on, if I would have been in a different situation, those folks could have been predators. Like there are so many things that could have happened just because you have to rely so much on so many other people, just to make ends meet and to have people come through and help. You don't know who that is, but for sure the layers of, I mean, I've witnessed it too, the layers of violence that are just in there, be it violent language or actual physical violence. All those things are just kind of there. And what are we doing to acknowledge that, to even notice it, to raise our baseline of what peace looks like and calm looks like, and then to acknowledge that that was totally different for our parents, because for sure, violence was a part of their reality. Like, domestic violence. So all of those things are just kind of there. And I just wonder what we're doing to shift the normalization of that with houses. But I will say this too, though. I think it's interesting that you've chosen a pastor, because, as kind of interesting as the dynamics were in my house, my father was a very religious man and was sleeping with everyone in the church. He's still very religious. And so my thing too is, I'm just like,
there's opportunity.
I don't know if I agree with your example. Maybe
I met a couple pastors like that too.
Professor, but I'm like,
that's the story of Krishna, though, too. Krishna is an enlightened being sleeping with everyone's wife all over town.
It's the story of it's the story of Rod Stryker. It's the story of you don't have to go back that far.
You did that. You brought his name up.
I sure did.
No,
I sure
my
did. I'm
goodness.
naming names at my age.
That's good.
Well, Amrit Desai, there's so many stories of that, right?
Yeah.
So
I want to go back to that you really painted a beautiful picture of trying to rest in a yin yoga class, and how the layers of ethnicity and class inform the experience of trying to drop down into that environment, and how I often marvel at the risks that I took as a white male, understanding the privilege that I had. If I tell some cop off, or if I go travel to another country, or I go to someplace different, I have a kind of sense that things are going to be okay. I'll figure it out, and I'm not going to get that much trouble, which is so completely different for someone who's not a white male. That the risks that you can take just trying to rest in a yoga room are a world away different, and we might be right on this, mats right next to each other.
Yeah, there's so many, so I'm also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. So the intersectionality of the reality of what I'm bringing into a room or anywhere, really, any space I occupy is very interesting. So first I'll just say that I want to clarify that when I'm talking about rest, I'm thinking about restorative yoga. And when I'm talking about yin yoga, I'm actually thinking about a space to place resilience and to process and use resilience for a good reason. And I want to ensure that I specify that, because the thing is that especially as a Black queer woman, that's 3 layers of necessary resilience. And I live in Texas, so there's a fourth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Y'all got your
so
own flag.
a lot of layers there. So for me, walking into a yin class, I'm already walking in with a lot of resilience. How can I use this in a way to re-embody, to place this somewhere besides just leaving it in my nervous system? But then the other thing about rest, you're so right. I mean, I could be resting next to people who are actively voting against my interests,
Yeah.
who are out carrying tiki torches and creating harmful environments.
They need to
You know,
relax
like,
too.
you know, and then going into a place like England, you know, which had such a direct impact on the lineage of my family, you know, or a place like Spain, you know, there's a lot of spiritual abolition that has to happen in order for me to just be like, okay, I'm not just going to be angry at the British Museum. I'm going to acknowledge what's happening here and also speak truth to power and also maybe not glorify, you know, what I'm seeing here. I just think that there's just a lot of kind of unknown things that, yeah, we're all dealing with when we get there. And so to be able to rest with that is huge. If I can rest with that, then I can also rest with grief, you know, a grief journey. I can rest with losing a friend, losing a job, losing status, because I have some skill. You know, yoga is skill in action, right? So I have some skill to be able to metabolize my feelings, metabolize my grief, to speak to it, and all those other things. And I just wish that people were a little more aware that when we're in a yoga space, especially in the West, especially when we have a lot of white supremacy that people still aren't necessarily naming or, you know, speaking to, it exists within the studio itself. I have experienced that numerous times, like just experienced white supremacy, experienced ableism, experienced hierarchy, experienced it from students and studio owners alike. And people don't realize that those dynamics are always at play in any space of privilege. And yoga is a space of privilege until it is made available, you know, economically, socioeconomically, and literally located in neighborhoods where you know, people exist that are on a lower socioeconomic strata, that those dynamics are always going to be at play.
That was
One thing too I want to just speak to
please.
is that whole idea of like being able to walk into a room and know that you're all right. I was telling someone recently, and their minds were blown, that I was saying how, you know, I wanted to go to Ghana, and you know, I told my wife, I was like, let's go to Ghana. She was like, can we go to Ghana? And I was like, actually, let me Google.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
I don't know.
As a white man, I would assume that I can go to Ghana. There's no question.
But it wasn't the black thing, because as a child of West Africa, yeah, come on in. But as a person who shares a last name with another woman, different.
Oh yeah. 100%.
You know,
Yeah.
and then friends who are like, "Hey, let's go to South Carolina and let's go do." I'm like, I'm not going to South Carolina. I'm black. They just barely took the Confederate flag down there. I'm not going there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people just don't realize that these are things that are in the back of my mind. Yeah, am I safe in this space? Am I safe in this space? Which identity isn't safe here? People talk about the man and the bear, but they're not actually talking about and thinking about all those other beasts that, you know, that someone that has an intersectional identity is thinking about in any space.
What was that quote? I know you wanted to say something, Harmony. I'm sorry, but what was that quote from James Baldwin? Like, it's bad enough that I'm black. I'm also a queer and an artist, and like that's a triple threat right there. And you know, and being
at least he wasn't a woman. that would have been even worse.
Well, okay. There's your thought.
Or better, depending on which way you look at it.
I know, queer woman artist Audre Lorde. You know, like Yeah.
It's
All of a
rough.
sudden, yeah, you're really, yeah, it's really he also says, it's challenging to be like awake and aware, within the society, you know what I mean? Like black and aware, black and awake. I forget the exact quote, but all of those things. I just think it's really interesting that we're kind of not talking about those things, but they're there. And the when we don't talk about them, we kind of don't realize that people are dealing with this. So everyone just kind of has access to love and light, right? Like love and light for everyone. Buy your Shiva T-shirt in the lobby. And it's just like
Yeah.
it's not. That's not people's realities. We
Right.
need to be kind of more aware that people are walking in with a few more layers than that.
Yeah.
If you're not angry, you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wait, then you need to rest to process your anger. To
Yeah,
be
I
with
just feel
it.
like
Slow
yeah, I
down.
just want to. Yeah, I want to change some things, and I don't want to live my whole life mad because I don't want to die at the age of 48.
Right?
Like
Yeah.
things like that. Like also acknowledging that. Well, let's see. Yes, I want things to change, but they're not. Righteous rage is important when it is a conduit to action, right? But just sitting with that, I'm not trying to sit with that. I'm not trying to have that in my nervous system.
Right? I mean, I think that's it's such a dichotomy because you do want things to change and you do want to be in action, and yoga is skill in action, and you want to do something about it. But also you can't just be in that space of internal violence, right? Because when you're angry, you're not
Right.
actually hurting or changing anything outside of you. You're only kind of hurting and changing yourself. And so you have to kind of do something to kind of distill the anger so
Yes.
that you can have love in your heart and then be in action and then do something about it and then go into the world and make the change
Right.
and
Right.
otherwise
Love
it becomes
love for
toxic, right?
yourself. Love for
Yeah.
yourself. Like I
Yeah.
love myself enough to not
Yeah.
carry this rage. I love myself enough to not carry all of these things. I'm going to acknowledge them. I'm going to do my part in changing them, but I refuse to hold all of these things because what then is the difference between me and my grandmother when she was a mammy? What is the difference of me holding on to all of the rage in the world than my grandmother taking care of other people's children? I'm not going to do it. If someone else wants to do it, that's fine. But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to name things. I'm going to actively co-create um, spaces and ways for us to do things differently. You know, Part of that means speaking truth to power, and the other part is giving people a place to distill what is happening and to rest alongside it, and eventually, hopefully, to rest without it, to be able to let it go. And that's where yoga nidra comes in, which is my third, primary modality. Can we begin visioning something that looks totally different? It's not something that ever existed before. We're going to have to create this from a place of unknowing but radical imagining. So we can do that with yoga nidra, and we can now sit here and start creating a world that's never existed before.
I love this. Tell us more about how you do that through yoga nidra, because I think when people think of yoga nidra, they think of like closing their eyes and falling asleep. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, I mean, that happens.
Yeah.
I mean, that does happen sometimes. But, with yoga nidra, we have an opportunity to, so it is rest with awareness. If yoga is discernment, yoga leads to state of yoga, yoga is awareness. Uh, it's a set of practices that allow for us to unlearn and to remove, to deform what has been formed, in order to then remember who we are and in order to reveal who we truly are. Then we're resting. We're dreaming with that, sleeping with that. Well, just as you mentioned before with samskaras and like bringing in these mind grooves of these, or these these memories, unprocessed memories that live in our psyche, well, it's really hard to create from a place of no memory. We're creating from a projection, right? Just like even from, me thinking my daughter may not ever come home or might become a drunk or something like that. That was me thinking, oh no, what if she follows the footsteps of her father or of her grandfather or something like that? Versus presuming that she's her own person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I was thinking she might be like me and she doesn't, drink at all or something, right? I was never thinking about her as her own person. So if we look at that and we look at Yoga Nidra, we actually have an opportunity the guide has an opportunity to create space so that in this deep state of awareness, people can radically imagine. We can set an intention through the sankalpa of what our heart truly desires, or we could create one for the group or for the individual that's very intentional. But then from there, we can start letting our mind see it, experience it, actually be. I always talk about this is an opportunity for us to create or posit memories that don't actually exist. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're creating from a place of lived experience, even though we never actually lived it. It
Yeah.
feels like a lived experience because we dreamt with it. We felt it in our hearts. So now we can create from that space. And I think that's what I'm actually doing right now through a very deep yoga nidra practice is creating um, this imagining that I've never actually seen, but I know is possible. This is also why I call myself a yoga futurist because I'm like, well, we've never seen that before. So we're just making shit up.
I think you're a yoga shaman.
I love that yoga futurist. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It reminds me of that Gandhi quote. Someone be the change you want to see in the world. And I was thinking about what you said about speaking truth to the power, and I feel like coming from that space of being, of the embodiment of one of the good sattva,
Sattva.
the embodiment of
Mm-hmm.
peacefulness, and then being able to speak truth to power from a place of love rather than a place of
Yes.
rage can be so much
Yes.
more effective. Because for me personally, like when I read Howard Zinn's A People's History of the United States, what I saw is that on every page, someone spoke truth to power and then was assassinated very quickly after. Like they were, so like speaking truth to power is an extraordinarily dangerous thing to do. And it's
Mm-hmm.
terrifying because you're going to
Mm-hmm.
get, you're the head sticking up, and that's scary.
Oh yeah, I think about all the time. People always, laud Martin Luther King Jr. I'm like, he didn't die because he wanted to. Like this, he was taken out. RFK was taken out. JFK was taken out. All these people are I think where we can be different and live differently, and people have said to me, you have a way of saying challenging things in a kind way.
Mm-hmm.
And my thing is, I'm not trying to be nice. Like, I don't want to be that Southern genteel, like, just pretend that everything's okay.
Yeah.
I'm very much like, hey, this is an issue, and it's an issue for all of us. This serves no one. How can we do better? Also, I'm not going to do the work for you, but we can dream together, we can vision together, and we're going to have to be in reciprocity over what that work looks like because I'm not going to do this for you. But I think like leading by example with that and being kind and saying, so for example, I had a person who was very upset with me. She was very upset with me because I wasn't saying what she wanted to hear regarding the situation in Gaza.
Oh yeah.
And so I said, there's and everyone's been upset, there's just so much anger and rage, and I think it makes a lot of sense because people are now kind of being like, oh my gosh, this is happening, and I'm like, y'all, I went to school in Austin in the 90s. Like, we have been well aware
Yeah,
of what is
people have been
going on
talking about
for
it. Yeah.
yeah, like decades we've known what's
Yeah.
going on, but this is new information for some folks.
Yeah.
But anyway, but it was a, but it was a, but it was there was a woman who didn't like that I wasn't, saying certain things or whatever. And I said, I feel so deeply that we are in this place of deep suffering and sadness together. And also, do not ever try to micromanage the way that I use my energy. As a Black queer woman, I am always in the work. You do yours. And that was it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to apologize for what I'm saying and what I'm not saying. I am constantly creating communities of love, care, compassion for all people. Period. I'm on the side of peace, love, care, compassion for all people. And I'm not going to sit here and I'm not going to give hierarchies to it. And I'm also going to name that. And you better not even try to fix your mouth to have me do it a way that you want it to be.
Yeah.
Go do your own work.
Yeah.
If you want it to look a certain way, you go do it.
Yeah. It's amazing
So-
to me how often people come to you and ask you to take a position on some fucked up thing you have no idea about. No one ever asks me to represent white men. And so how are white men going to feel on this subject? Like, no one ever has ever asked me that.
Right?
I think
Could you speak for white men, please?
Yeah,
Right.
No,
well, we don't give a
Right.
shit. Is that what you mean?
Whereas people are like, well, what does the Black community say about this? I'm like, we're not a monolith. We're not a monolith. I'm like,
Right?
I can throw a rock and hit a couple of people who I definitely don't agree with. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
it's a mess, and I think really it's just we really want people to help, right?
Yeah.
But we need to understand that work has to be from within. We each have to do our work, and whatever you want to see, you go create it. I'm not going to do that for you. I'm already doing things.
Yeah. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's the other thing that in this very interconnected world that we live in, where, everything's on social media and we're so aware of like all the different conflicts and things going on. I think it's, we have to take into consideration that people are dealing with their own lives. Like they
Right.
actually have things going on in their personal lives
Right.
that are maybe difficult to deal with, and they can't take on Gaza right now.
Right.
Like as much as they care about it, they just are
or,
not.
Are, but not doing it in a performative way.
Exactly.
Oh, sure.
Exactly.
It's just,
yeah.
it's also that. But if we move it from, because of course someone's going to hear that and be like, whatever.
I know.
I can tell you right now, come at me and be blocked and be blessed. But like, but even if it's like another, a totally different example, there's a person that I knew who had a major, very public kind of meltdown.
Yeah.
And then later we had a clearing about it. And I didn't feel that you really showed up for me then. I was like, my brother had just died.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Like, did you know?
Didn't know.
Did you even know that happened? Did you know that like my brother and one of my best friends died within 3 months of each other?
Yeah.
I'm like, I had other things going on. I acknowledge and appreciate how much you did and you were going through.
Yeah.
And that's your shit. That's not my shit. Like everyone has their own shit, but guaranteed, if that same person would have asked for a little help, I probably would have been like, you know what? I know that I'm in grief right now, but let me go show up for my friend. And I was just like, it's incredible to me how much we don't realize how much people are dealing with on their own. Like they're dealing with their own lives. They're dealing with their own sadness, their own anxiety, their own grief. And some folks have a lot of space to cope with all these things that aren't near to them because they're not coping with the things that are near to them. That's the thing is it's like, if you're actually in the work of your own things, it's really hard to be in all the other things.
Yeah.
But one of my friends and a trainer for Ashe Yoga School, which is my yoga school, um, he's a traditional Chinese medical practitioner. And he said in his very soft voice, he's like, what do we do when there are all of these things going on in the world? What do we do? And people were like, I don't know, go do the thing, go do this, go do that. And he said, be happy. Because if we're all connected, then your joy adds to the joy of the world. Yeah. If you're miserable, your misery adds to the misery of the world.
100%.
And I was just like, whoa, you know. And he wasn't saying don't be active, don't do the things. But it's like, don't hold what's not yours to hold. Don't carry what's not yours to carry. Yes, go make action. So for anyone who's going to listen and be pissed off that I didn't say the right thing, I'm not saying don't vote people out. I am not saying don't donate. I'm not saying all those things. Yes. Vote, donate, do the things, spread the word, spread information, do all the things.
Take a position.
And what I'm also take a position, you know, like take something, say something. And what I am saying is that it is not something for us to hold in lieu of doing our own work of healing, our own work of revealing, our own trauma processing, our own all of the things. How many of us actually took time to process what happened for 4 years?
In COVID?
Yes.
Or in Trump.
Oh God.
Because that was hard.
I
just want to say, I haven't had a chance to really talk about it.
And the Trump wave. I know. Can we have a support group for
right?
Just living in a post-Trump?
When you said tiki torch, it's like that's it. That was that's the emblem that I'm going to think of the Trump period. It was the tiki torch.
Oh, like, you're lucky because the emblem I think of is ARs.
AR, sure.
Oh my God.
You know, like literally, I see so much violence.
Yeah.
That I'm just like, this is the world
Texas
we're
governor
living in.
just fucking pardoned a guy who murdered activists on the street with his car. And it's like, well, they brandished a gun, so I shot him. It's like, you fucking ran into him with your car.
My wife was saying, my wife is white and she's former military. And she was telling me, she was like, I can't believe that just happened. It's like every now and then she has these moments of revelation of the world we actually live in is super racist.
Wow.
And she's like,
that's amazing.
I know. She's like, this is horrible. I'm like, yeah, babe. Yes. Welcome. You know?
Sounds like she lives in like the world I like to live in, which is like my own little bubble of sort of like peace and harmony and goodwill and love. And then I hear these like little pieces of news and I'm like, what's going on in the world?
I try to stay informed.
I trust the uniform.
He's my news source, so he's like, hey.
Ms. Tamika, I just want to ask you a question. We can edit this whole portion out, but I don't know if it's something that you want to get into or not. So I just want to preface it that way. But I wondered if you would share with our listeners the arc of your experience and how difficult these choices were for you to be married to a man and have a child and then make that transition to where you are now to being out and married to a white girl, which is kind of surprising. Not what I expected.
He said a white girl.
A white girl.
I'm sorry, a member
of the military.
A member of the military. Some tween that you picked up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, edit all this. No, I'm just joking. No, I love this. No, this is, it's interesting. I was raised this is a very common experience, by the way, of like Black folks that are from the South. I was very much raised with a don't trust white people type mentality. But at the same time, we were constantly aspiring to a lived reality of white folks. Mm-hmm. And so I just think that was really interesting. My family's Creole, so Creoles have a lot of their own colorism and a lot of their own, a lot of our own bullshit that we really just need to work out because of safety and because, literally like being fairer got you treated better, right? And by better, like not beaten on a daily basis, like,
Yeah.
so for me, my journey has just been really authentic. I think that I very much just always listen to myself. So even going to university, that was my own journey. My parents didn't do that for me. They didn't even push university on me. They didn't even know where I was going. I was like, "Hey, y'all, I'm going to University of Texas." They're like, "Oh, awesome!" Like they had no idea. I moved myself there, um, and I never went back to Dallas. When I was there, I I loved languages and cultures. And so I was always around that. I was working to become fluent in Spanish. So I was always around other cultures. And that being always around other cultures showed me so much of just what I didn't know about the world. I remember having a conversation in my dorm with a Hasidic Jew. And I just remember thinking, I don't know any Jews from where I grew up. And sitting there and learn and just having conversations with him and like trying to understand anti-Semitism because it wasn't something I was raised with. We didn't have anyone that was like an out Jew or even an out Muslim. It was just only evangelical Christians. That was my whole reality. And I knew that there was something wrong with that because I knew that that had to look a certain way, but I couldn't really name it. So my first kind of awakening was through a very Latin American experience, a very Jewish experience at school. And then I was just like, oh, I kind of am seeing that the world is different. So I think that because of that, I've always just taken people for who they are. And I've always been available to myself to expand because my mind, my frame of reference was blown at such a young age at 18. I remember being really pissed at my parents for not talking about racism more when I took my first African American culture and history class. I was like, how did I not know this? This happened where you lived. Like, I didn't, like, and my mother was just like, well, I'm from a small town. And my dad's like, we don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And I was just like, So there was just so much I didn't know. So fast forward, I married a Cuban who was an immigrant. And we only spoke Spanish in the house. And we had that whole lived experience. Had my daughter.
Was he anti-Marxist?
Um, is this being recorded? No, I'm just joking. All Cubans at that time were members of the Communist Party unless they came to the United States, and then they had to renounce that.
Okay.
But those ideals were still there. And
okay.
and by the way, he lives in Cuba again. So, but I was in Austin, so like Marxism was a whole thing in Austin. But anyway,
Still is,
I
I
just,
think.
I just,
100%.
I just remember. So anyway, going up and down this ride, but I went. Fast forward, I knew that I was attracted to kind of like all people. I wasn't kind of interested in deciding I like you based on your genitalia first. That just wasn't a filtering system for me. But I didn't have a lot of mentors around me that kind of normalized that or named that. So later, when I finally came out, which was at 30, which was really interesting because at that time, now I have a 12-year-old and I have to kind of explain, all of that.
Yeah.
But she'd been around queer people. I've been around queer people since I was 15, but as an ally, not kind of understanding that I was in the community. So by the time my wife and I finally met, we were really good friends. I finally had a group of people who were around me who were like queer women. I'd always had queer men around me, but I always say I was raised by a pack of drag queens. But like queer women, that was important for me to have. And this entire time I was on my journey, my spiritual journey, my yoga journey, and just my journey of accepting who I was. So by the time I met my wife, I was just like, I don't know, this is who I am. Who are you? And we were really good friends. I never expected to marry a woman, but this year will be 11 years we've been married. And she's in her work too. I don't know that I could have married a white person who was not in their work, or who hadn't had a lived experience outside of a very small kind of unexamined reality. But because she's former military, Army especially, a lot of Black folks there, a lot of queer women there, a lot of things to just examine and explore, and also a war veteran. So there's also a lot of examination of value of life, seeing things from a much larger perspective. Wow. And we both are travelers, and all of that helped. But it's the journey of authenticity that was definitely scaffolded through my yoga practice and through my own spiritual journey that led me to a very authentic life, which just so happens to include a white woman. Every now and then, though, we still have our moments where I'm like, I need you to examine this. When we're in really challenging, we saw the Kahindi Wiley exhibit, and I was like on the, practically like, and she was like, incredible. I'm mad about some of this, and I'm like, let's talk about it. So things like that, have been a part of that. I know that was kind of a long road, but I explained about 30 years.
Distill your life into 30 seconds. No, I think it's so beautiful. And I'm really curious about your yoga journey and how that fit in, because I feel like there's a lot, like, speaking about power dynamics and like coming into yoga spaces that are curated, for, especially in Western culture. I mean, we'll just talk about sort of here, because that's where I think you came to yoga first, right? Like white women in leotards with very thin bodies. I mean, how
$8 coffee in their hand.
Yeah, how did you come into yoga?
Well, I mean, I came to yoga way before that, actually. Okay. So I came to yoga in college at around 19, and I already had a breath work practice because I was a trained singer. I thought I was going to be an opera singer a long time ago. So I was a trained singer, and so I already had kind of understanding of breath work. So when I realized that breath work was like a practice, then I went into there and just did like gym yoga and things like that. But it was just people at school. There wasn't a kind of an archetype that I noticed. When I started noticing archetyping was when I started doing yoga at home. But my first teacher, if you will, was Rodney Yee. Yeah. So even still, it was not like white women or like thin women, but it was a very flexible Asian man who would fall from grace many years later, right?
Yeah. So, on his own journey.
Did you see Rodney Yee on Oprah?
I didn't. Although I loved Oprah. Oprah was a part of my journey too, by the way, because she was this big Black woman who wasn't particularly pretty, and she was brilliant. And I was like,
visible representation, right? How important is that? Visible representation.
Oh, yes.
How important is that, right?
It was so important. Also, she is absolutely why I don't have a very specific Texas accent, because I was like,
watch that show,
I was like, I don't want to sound like Ross Perot. I don't want people to be able to name where I'm from. I want them to be a little confused. But anyway, but so I came into, so by the time I went to a yoga studio, which was years later, this is like 2008, 2009, and it was a hot yoga studio.
Oh my gosh.
I was like, I'm the only one who looks like this. I'm visibly fatter than everyone else. I'm a little older. I'm Black. Like, there were no Black people in the studio. This is in Houston. Like, there should be Black people somewhere. Right. And
that's right.
It was like, I'm like, white people aren't even the majority here. but it was very not Black. Okay. And so that was kind of interesting, but I will say that I was more caught up with my size because it was hot yoga. So you're wearing very little clothing.
Yeah.
So I had to really deal with that. It wasn't until later that I was like, it's ridiculous that there aren't other Black folks here. And honestly, where it has really become horrifying is nowadays, where we know better. We know that we know that that what we see on social media isn't representative of all people. But we have major yoga studios that are venture capitalist backed, that are putting bodies out there that just are like models that they're putting through teacher trainings, or are just like people who are bendy former dancers and things like that, and that are crafting a narrative of what yoga looks like. And that is not what yoga looks like. I mean, go to literally any city and actually look at the bodies in the room. And in 2024, they don't look like what you see on Instagram. So it's really not the studios inside of a physical studio that's the problem anymore. It's virtual studios, it's social media, it's the Vogue effect, the Vogue magazine effect. That's what's happening. And it's still saying, hey, look, this is what we look like. And it's like, no, it's not. Not on any level. Not on any level. It's just it's frustrating to see, because literally I do not see myself ever in what is out there. So I'm constantly the representation.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just like, come on, y'all. Like, there are way too many Black people in the world and in yoga. There are way too many bigger bodied people in the world and in yoga for me to constantly be the one person occupying this space or whatever. Like, get over it. Like, let's do better.
Yeah.
But they're really like, you can name the folks. Think about it. If you think about bigger bodied Black women, we can name them. We can all name them. Jessamine Stanley, Diane Bondi.
Yeah.
Like, well, there are your two. Are there any more
Right.
besides me? Like, where are they?
Yeah.
And they're
But
out
they're
there.
everywhere. That's the thing. They're just maybe not on social media.
Yes, because not everyone wants to do the labor.
Yeah.
Not everyone wants to do the labor of representation, because it is labor.
Yeah.
Yeah. That reminds me of
And also just being on social media is exhausting.
Bruh.
Like, it's not just like labor, like in like representation. It's just also
It's such a job.
yeah.
It's
just
such a job.
yeah that you don't
it's
get paid
such a
for.
I mean, sometimes you get paid for it in things.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Here's your water bottle or your supplements.
I want to say something it's kind of tangential, but it reminded me of something that you said just 5 minutes ago, and I just remember being furious about the Nina Simone. You mentioned that you were a singer, and I was furious about the Nina Simone biography, because somehow in this sanctioned Nina Simone biography, they got a Lena Horne to play Nina Simone. And it kind of speaks to just how deeply embedded colorism and body shapeism, or whatever, I don't know how the right way to call it.
I love that, body shapeism.
Shapeism.
We're gonna add that to the lexicon.
Like, don't give me Lena Horne if you're gonna play Nina Simone. And it seems that's the one place where you would want a real representation,
a
real person,
accurate resemblance,
an accurate resemblance. Give me the nose, give me the color, give me the give me the whole body.
Give me the truth.
Give me the
Give
truth.
me the truth.
And then you give me this.
That said a lot, actually.
Yeah.
And I love Zoe Saldana. I do.
Sure.
I think she's doing so much for like just reminding people that Afro-Latinos exist. And Nina Simone was very much a unique person who had a unique look, who was not someone who people consider traditionally pretty, who was not someone who was thin, who was not, there were all of these things. And it was an opportunity to actually, be real.
And glorify Nina Simone. Glorify
but
her
I'm telling,
look.
right. But people don't want that. People do not want real.
Yeah.
People, well, not people. I'll say that Hollywood, I won't even say Hollywood. I'll say that LA doesn't want real.
Yeah.
LA doesn't want real. I worked for an LA based yoga company for the last 4 years, the last year of which was fully, interesting. And LA wants perfect. Let me just, I'll tell you one quick little thing. That was my wake up call. Back in Thanksgiving 2023, so this past Thanksgiving, I was cooking and I was rushing because I don't like being late, and I was already a little rush, a little behind. So I was rushing and I was cooking and I wanted to make braised short ribs. By the way, not everyone who's in yoga is a vegan. So anyway, so I'm making these braised short. I was like, if I can figure out how to make braised short ribs, we'll never have to dine out again because I love them so much. So I'm like, but I'm rushing, right?
Oh, it's an 8-hour journey, sister. I'm sorry.
So the oil's a little too hot and I'm just not paying attention, and I drop in a short rib with a little too much vigor, and the oil splashes up in my face and neck and burns. I have this massive, my face is melting. This is Thanksgiving Day. It's a major accident. My wife is like, oh my gosh, what are I doing? Like, first of all, we need to turn off the oil. Like, go get burned stuff. Right. I'm like, go get burned things. And I'm just like, whatever. I look at my face after. By the way, dinner was still ready on time. Well, it was an hour delayed.
Oh my
but
gosh.
I looked, people show up. I look like the Elephant Man. So I'm over here. I'm like, face is melting. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like, talk about just sojourner syndrome. Anyway, I'm like, no, I'm fine. No, face is like, rrr. My family's just like, they're like, but these short ribs are tasty. Anyway, I was sitting here having this moment, and I'm like, I can't work. Like, I can't work because my face. So I tell my people, I'm like, hey, look, like my face is melted right now. I can't go on camera. Blah, blah, blah. And we had a shoot that was coming up a month later. I'm like, I've got to get my face in order. I've got to look, normal before the shoot comes. And that was when I realized that my career as a yoga teacher in that moment had nothing to do with my skill as a teacher. And everything to do with me being able to be pretty enough to justify being on camera. Because if it were a studio, I could have gone in and people would have been like, oh, but it wouldn't have been a big deal. But this is video that's going to live forever. These are photos. This is everything. I'm already the big bodied person. There's only one. I'm already the only Black person. There's only one.
Oh my
so
gosh.
I have to, this face better show up right,
Yeah.
And then I remember just thinking, is it just me? And so I went and I got my face. I was able to get it together for the shoot. And I remember saying to the person who was running the thing at the time, it just dawned on me how much of our teaching is aesthetic.
Yeah.
And she
There
said,
you go.
yep. She said, yep.
Yeah.
I was like,
Totally
what
took it for
does
granted.
this have to do with yoga?
Yeah.
What does any of this have to do with yoga? None of it.
Just
None of it is,
Yeah.
but that's what it's been reduced to, right?
Yeah.
How pretty are you? How jacked is your body? How many chaturangas can you do? Not how much, human growth hormone that you take to get there. Not how much, Ozempic are you taking to get there? How much you're vomiting to get there? Like all of those things, they're all
800 milligrams of
real.
ibuprofen.
Right. How much grape juice you're drinking to get there. Like
Yeah.
all of these things that are really real. How is all of that showing up, that diet culture, EDs,
Yeah.
actually showing up so that we can be pretty enough, eating disorders, so that we can be
erectile
pretty
dysfunction.
enough.
Sorry. It's like, yeah, I'm trying here. I'm doing my best.
How much?
I'm trying to show up here.
It's got a little performance anxiety.
No, I'm whatever it takes,
Also, no.
Yeah, on top of it all. Just makes the
Just goes to
situation
show
worse.
where a man defaults and where a woman defaults. You say ED,
Eating
women
disorder,
are like, oh yeah,
erectile
eating
dysfunction.
disorder.
Yeah, we're struggling, both of us.
But yours only, not saying yours, that only affects one person, whereas the other affects.
Yeah, it affects
Anyway.
a culture, right?
No,
it
it
affects how we
directly-
see each other.
It directly
and
affects your
see
my
ourselves.
erectile dysfunction directly affects your experience.
It does. It does.
It
It's
takes
shameful.
shameful.
But are you pretty enough to be on camera?
No, she is.
No, I think I love that you're speaking into this because I feel like when I started yoga, it was, back in the day before yoga was really cool or popular and it
On
was
TV.
something that really helped me connect to my body and like practice in a way that felt like I was really nurturing my body and for the first time like love myself and realize
Loving
that
yourself, right?
yeah, that my body wasn't something to just be abused and used,
Exactly.
but that it was like a vital part of like my energy and my mind and like an
Right.
integrative self and it was a very healing experience. And somewhere along the way, and I feel like social media has had a huge influence on this, it started to feel more and more performative. And the more performative it felt, the more aesthetic and the more performative, the more competitive, the less healing and the less like
And the less
the more
interested you-
harm.
the more harmful
it's
it felt.
literally actively creating harm right now.
Yeah.
It's literally actively bolstering systems of oppression. It is
I agree.
actively going in the wrong direction right
agree.
now.
Yeah.
And all of that body love. I mean, I fell in love with my body through yoga. That is a lot.
Right?
That is a lot.
yeah.
You know, when as a woman living in a bigger body, falling in love with myself and saying Vogue magazine's bullshit, Teen Vogue is bullshit, I always say Vogue, Cosmopolitan, all of those, they're all bull. They're all bull. These are all images. Number one, they don't look like me, so I don't have to aspire to look like that. They're not they're not like anyone I was raised with. I just remember feeling so confidently revolutionary in my body love, which was an aspect of my yoga practice. And now it's like, I don't know, can I wear those leggings? Do I have camel toe? Like,
Right.
that's a whole thing.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to be on camera. Is that going to show up? Or are my rolls going to show? Is this going to show? I didn't give a shit about any of that. I was practicing in booty shorts and a sports bra in a hot yoga studio because I was hot.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be less hot.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh, let me make sure everything's all tight and because the camera's there.
Yeah.
It's turned into a really harmful place.
Yeah.
And I just hope that people start naming it and doing better. But I'm about to write an article actually about this. Like, as we move deeper into digital yoga, what does that look like? Do we actually think it's going to look like equity? Do we actually think there are going to be more black and brown bodies represented? Do we actually think that that's not what sells? What sells is anger and skinny white cis heteronormativity. So like, where does the not that exist within this landscape?
Yeah, and
don't know.
it seems too then, I mean, there are some other bigger body. I mean, it's all around, but it just gets also sexualized, which is again like this
Oh my
other. I mean,
gosh.
that's like this whole other
Oh gosh,
weird
yes.
avenue of yoga. I looked at this account the other day, and it's this Indian woman who I mean, I don't even know if it's an actual person, to be honest, because but it must be. But I was just like, why? Like every single photo is just like a huge crotch shot. Like
Yeah.
legs behind the head, splits with your crotch
Yeah.
like to the camera, and
Yeah.
like, and yeah,
Yeah.
okay, so you have 2 million followers or whatever, but what, like, what is going
Right.
on here? Like, what does this have to do with yoga? I
Well,
mean, outside of like,
I keep asking, I'm like, what are they selling? So,
yeah,
every time I look at anything, I'm always like, what's the intended audience and what are they selling?
Yep.
Just
100%.
the whole bit of it. What is I get it. Instagram is very aspirational. That's
yeah,
like, that's what sells, right? Whereas
mm-hmm.
like TikTok is unhinged and that's what
Mm-hmm.
sells.
Yeah,
But it's just like, I will take unhinged over that if that is what that needs to look like. But
yeah,
also, I think that until there are more images of people that aren't doing that, I mean, also just meditating isn't a sexy photo, right?
that's right, I
Or
know,
even if it is, it's not real. Like you're
yeah.
like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I'm going to meditate now.
after
It's
after
just like
after I diet for 30 days and sit on a beach or overlook a mountain
right.
view.
Or self care has to happen in Tulum, or
Yeah,
it has to
Yeah,
happen
with
in
my
Bali.
Manhattan, I'm
yeah.
meditating.
Right. I have to wear the mala beads, and it has to be like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
spiritual now. Like, there's also that whole commercialized image of spiritual life, and
Yeah.
it's not accessible to anybody. It's just odd, and I just don't know where it ends, but I do know that I can get pissed about it, or I can create what I want to see in the world. So for
Yeah.
me, that looks like putting more of myself out there. I guess I'm going to keep being the third in the trifecta of big black women. Um,
Well, we're grateful
like,
for it. We're
Yeah.
grateful for the
thanks.
trifecta, for your presence in the world.
It's an
But
amazing.
I,
It's it's an amazing thing because like the essential problem that we're trying to fix with yoga is the ability to turn the phone off, and we're using the phone to preach that message. And so
what?
again, the medium is the problem. The medium of delivery is the problem in itself. And so like
It's like rest getting you arrested.
it's like
It's the
rest getting you
same.
arrested. That's exactly what it
We
is.
come full circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and the amount of actual like actioned skill one has to put the phone down is so much. I'm not that skillful. I
Mm-hmm.
am not that skillful. If I'm stressed out or I'm wanting to dissociate, I'm going to scroll, and
Yeah.
I'm very just kind of transparent about that. Like that is something I talk about all the time. I'm like, I used to be a huge reader. Now I just read social media.
Mm-hmm.
And how's that impacted relationships also around us, but the
Discourse.
relationship to self,
Yeah.
the relationship to self. I'm constantly just thinking, I find myself just getting mad about, I can't believe that they put that out there. I can't believe that this account looks like this. I can't believe
Mm-hmm.
that they're normalizing this. I can't believe, and I'm just like, whoa, 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 whoa. So now I've adopted my own little thing that keeps me sane, hopefully, which is don't get distracted.
Mm.
Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Don't get distracted. So I might still scroll or whatever, but I'm going to be mindful of how that is affecting me,
Mm.
so that I'm not, neither. I mean, comparison usually. The beautiful thing about being a black woman in a bigger body is comparison. Like I never see myself. So
Right.
comparison, like not being in comparison, is actually easy because I've
Mm.
never really had a lot of mentors.
Wow.
Aside from like seeing Oprah when I was growing up,
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't really have. If she would have come out and she and Gail would have been in a relationship, that would have
Oh.
been amazing. Anyway,
Yeah.
Mm.
I'm like, come on, Oprah, just come out. But
bye, Stedman.
he's just wallpaper. But but seriously though, I never saw myself, so I will say that comparison has never been the thief of my joy. Mm-hmm. But I do acknowledge that if you do look in any way like the folks whose bodies are normalized, whose skin color is normalized as normal and everything else is a default, that is creating a lot of harm. And I get upset about it because at the end of the day, I'm a mama bear. And through my own work of not cleaning up other people's messes, I also acknowledge that it is the community's job to clean that up. It is not mine. Yeah. Now I'll keep putting my things out there. I'm going to keep speaking what I'm speaking. I'm going to keep sharing, and I'm going to keep creating community and creating space. The community needs to get its shit together because it's creating harm, and it's bolstering and sustaining. It's giving platform for systems of oppression with a language of liberation. and that ain't it.
That's it.
Yeah, I love that. Well, tell us, I mean, you've created the Ranch Houston, and you have your virtual space, Ashe Yoga Collective, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. So tell us how people can find you and work with you, and what those spaces, what they'll find in those spaces.
Well, you'll find flowers. So the Ranch Houston is flowers. A third space in Houston, Texas. We're an urban farm where we leverage, we're creating impact for LGBTQ plus and BIPOC folks to have a place that's not a bar, it's not a protest, where we can gather. We fund our impact through garden consultations, garden installs, and through selling our flowers. And then we also have retreats once or twice a year where we do art and yoga and really kind of share the space. So that's where I'm living. That's what I do so much of all the time.
How many acres do you have there? Is it quite...
2.5 acres? Wow. So it's a little micro farm, for the Midwesterner over there. It's very small.
You got more land than we do up here in the cities.
Listen, but it's in the city of Houston, 2.5 acres in the city of Houston. Horses all up and down the street. It's amazing.
That's amazing.
Ashe Yoga Collective is actively working to disrupt the lie of sameness in yoga. It is a virtual yoga studio and yoga school that is empowering people to not only teach, but also lean into the subtler side and the yin side of yoga. So we specialize in yin yoga, restorative yoga, and yoga nidra. When there is flow on the platform, it's more like slow flow, gentle, things like that. We just believe that, your transcendence isn't linked to your ability to do a lot of work. So one of the things we recently just started saying is Ashe Yoga Collective, we rest here. So,
lovely.
But yeah, I would love to see if people want to immediately create impact, they can join. Yeah. That's where they can practice with me now, or they can themselves be a part of the solution by going through our 300 hour and becoming and empowering themselves to teach trauma-sensitive yoga to traditionally marginalized communities. So that's how they can support.
Oh, wonderful. Awesome. I've looked at your offerings online and they look incredible. So I hope that a lot of people sign up. And
where can people find out?
We'll have all the links in the show notes, but if you want to.
The website and the Instagram for those
AsheYoga.com for Ashe Yoga and the Ranch Houston for all things Ranch Houston. We really are hoping that locals will come and be a part of our things. We have pride events and all sorts of things because we're so gay over here. We're just, especially in the month of June, we are super gay and we just are loving it. Well, Ashe Yoga Collective is also super gay, but it's also a deep allied space. So both of them are. You don't have to be BIPOC or queer to be in any of those spaces. We deeply, deeply care for and love our allies who are in the work with us.
Calgary is so much like Austin. It's so crazy. Like you're in the middle of cow and oil country, and then Calgary elected a gay Muslim black man as mayor.
What?
And it's like, it's just kind of there's a lot of similarities in just how progressive Calgary is compared to Austin. Maybe Edmonton's a titch more progressive, but it's
Edmonton, really? Like, as a hockey fan, I did not know that Edmonton was so progressive. Calgary is the sister city to Houston.
Yes, it is.
That's right.
Yes, it is. I know. We should visit each other more often.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I would love to go there. I've never been to Calgary, and I would love to go. I love Canada. Houston is going to be a little hot, but I guarantee you will eat so well over here.
We'll come to the Calgary Folk Festival. We'll put you up, and you can see all the musical acts. They do an amazing event. I volunteer every year, and so I'll get you in there, and you should come by.
Yeah.
I would love that. Also, if you all ever do a yoga festival, like, holler at your girl, All right. Love to see. I would love to let people know, hey, we're here. Like,
yeah. Well, next time, I don't know when the next time will be when we're in Houston, but we'll definitely be looking you up. Coming by.
Oh, yes. And I would say that we would put you up here, but we turned a 4-bedroom home into a 1-bedroom home. But we have...
Sounds like what I want to do with our house.
Listen, I was like, look, this is just us. We're creating a little... But we do have really deep relationships with the hotel around the corner. Okay. And eventually we'll have a little space on our farm. So when people can visit, we can put them up.
That's so cool.
So we'd love that.
By put you up, I meant this couch right here. That's what I actually meant.
Well, if we're going with couches, I got you too. Okay.
Thank you so much for coming on today. It was such a pleasure to connect with you.
It's my pleasure. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's summertime, and we have a fun summer challenge, a little game to play with you this summer. We want to get to know you. We want to stay connected, and we want to see where you are listening to this episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. So wherever you are on your summer vacation, at the beach, at the cabin, or even a staycation at home, relaxing in the sun, maybe on your patio or by a fire pit, snap a photo, tag us at Finding Harmony Podcast on Instagram, and we cannot wait to see where you're listening to the Finding Harmony podcast and reach out and connect with you and say hi. So come on over, take a photo, post it to your social media, your stories, or a post, tag at Finding Harmony Podcast, and let us know what you loved about the episode you're listening to, what episode you're listening to, what you loved about the episode you're listening to. I can't wait to see you and connect with you online soon. That's it. We've concluded another episode of the Finding Harmony podcast. I just want to thank you so much for doing the work that changes the world, starting with yourself. It truly does make a huge difference. Please make sure you have your automatic downloads turned on wherever you listen so you don't miss any of the upcoming episodes. I have so much more magic I can't wait to share with you. Lastly, if you're on Instagram, I love connecting and hearing from you. So come on over and say hello at Finding Harmony Podcast. And you can also come say hello to me personally at Harmony Slater Official. Thank you again for being here. I cannot wait to share more with you in our next episode.